Jack Parsons got me on the moon. Jack Parsons got me on the moon. Hello again, everybody. I seem to have gotten into some trouble. I'm good at that. Uh, Regarding saying that Tucker Carlson and Christians and Jews and Abrahamics worship the planet Saturn. And so one person sent me an email saying, "You better explain yourself. I've been a follower of yours for over a decade, and now you're telling me that I worship a planet." Okay, then I'll explain myself. Okay, so this is really about three things: astrotheology, planetary animism, and cosmism. Okay, so I'm using this video to dovetail things I'm interested in into my explaining myself when I said that the God of Abraham is the planet Saturn. So yeah, okay. So there's a lot of research gone into this, and it's totally verifiable. So I'm not pulling this out of my hole or something like that. So anyway, let's talk about astrotheology. Astrotheology is the belief that the planetary motions, the stars and everything, they have impacted upon religion, and or the creation of religion, the formation of religious ideas. Purely symbolic now, purely symbolic. As this goes right back to ancient Greece, really, and but it really took off in the 1800s. It's sort of stewed around over the centuries, when you had English ministers who would actually wrote it up into books and things like that. And on the surface it does kind of make its own kind of sense, except it got really big again with the truthers. And about 10 years ago, I remember there was a woman going around, I can't remember her name, Acharya something. She wrote an interesting book about astrotheology, and it seems to be, it's funny enough, it seems to be big among the theosophists, which makes sense. It sits nicely in with theosophy, and it also was popular with the Jehovah. A lot of them seem to be ex-Jehovah Witnesses that push this thing. A lot of they call themselves ex-Jehovah Witnesses, but they push this astrotheology thing. Why, I don't know, but that just seems to be a weird kind of thing. It's, even in the alt scene, a lot of them tend to be. I think Jordan Maxwell was an ex-Jehovah Witness, and Santos Bonacci was an ex-Jehovah Witness, and I may be wrong with that woman, Cherry S, whatever her name was. I think she was one too. But I'm not saying it means anything or there's anything sinister there. It's just I just find that interesting. So, so the concepts are that religious ideas in Abrahamic tradition are tied to cosmic cycles and planetary motions and things like that. So you have this belief that the Son of God is the sun. That's the sun in the sky. That's not. There's no truth to that at all. That's that's just that. It sounds like must be kind of thing when you really look into it. Now, the Son of God would never be, they say the halo and all that represents. You see, there's a lot of that kind of thing. The halos appear around lots of Christian saints. It's just it was just the way it was the showing divinity that they had the kind of God, the blessing of God among them. So they show you pictures of Jesus with the halo. Oh, look, Son of God. But they ignore the ones that have like the Virgin Mary or Saint John the Evangelist and all the others. So that's that's the classic truther stuff, isn't it? Like, ignore some things. It's like the way that it's like the black cube bullshit. They say, well, if it's a black cube of Saturn, how? If you fold the hexagon into, look at a certain angle, it looks at a cube. Well, okay, that's just bullshit. You just made that up to fit your theory. That's not a cube on top of Saturn. It's a hexagon. Stop it. This kind of thing. It's like the fit a theory, and so on. But astrotheology kind of developed that way in the truther world. That kind of way, and of course, like the Sabbateans and all, that's the real thing. They really exist and all that stuff. But the cube thing is just totally like it's one of those made up things in alt media, like Tataria and all that kind of thing, and big trees. You cut down with chainsaws perfectly. So the chainsaw must have been the size of like Ireland. But anyway, we'll forget about that. And it fits a theory that someone has, so therefore it becomes evidence, but it's not really. It's just it's wildly speculative. And astrotheology was a big deal among theosophists, and it was a big deal about 10, 15 years ago in the alt scene. And you had people like Santos Bonacci becoming like superstars, Jordan Maxwell, and they would basically just talk shit, bullshit, absolute bullshit, based on something that did have some truth to it, of course. But it was just like I saw, if you look at Santos Bonacci's lectures, they're all over the place, and the truth is they're all stoned, and they're all like, like, oh, great knowledge being dropped. What does he mean? I don't know. Don't ask. I've been at these events. This is what the fuckers are like, but they've no discernment. Some of them do, but most of them don't. Because they're bamboozled with words and pictures of constellations and the earth and the things. Or a 9-hour video on Tataria on Rumble. They think it's truth, just because it's through repetition and bamboozlement and bombardment. But it's kind of funny actually. But anyway, so that astrotheology, its relationship to the planets regarding a spiritual thing is purely symbolic, right? So remember that this is purely symbolic things. The religious canon remains, and so it's not like I've seen a lot of truthers say things like you Christians, your religion isn't real. You worship the sun and not the Son of God. No, that's but the astrotheologists. The original ones were all Christians. The later ones that came at the extra Jehovah's Witnesses and the Theosophist ones kind of tried to make out that you were being fooled somehow, which is kind of interesting because it ties into the next bit that I'm going to talk about, which is planetary animism. Now, animism is the belief that all natural things at some level have a soul. It's central to paganism, particularly European paganism, but you'll also find it in Taoism and Shintoism as well. A belief that everything, like even a rock on the ground, has a consciousness to it, a psyche, a spiritual dimension. It's not it's not just dead matter. Everything has a spirit or a soul, and which I believe personally. And so in Ireland you have Ireland is full of it. The River Shannon is named after Shiona, the Irish goddess of the River Shannon. The Boyne River is named after the Boan goddess, the cow goddess, one of the earliest goddesses of Ireland. But you see bull veneration and bovine veneration is everywhere in the pagan world. You've seen me make many videos about that over the years. And on and on and on. Loch Earn is named after a Yerna, who was the priestess to the Morrigan, I believe. No, was it? I forget. I'm confused. There's loads of stories on that one, but the original name of Ireland comes from that area, and of course, Éire is. If you're in the Loch Earn region, go to Boa Island. Very important, and see the idols there. And so the Ireland is a goddess, Eru, also known as Fulda and Bamba. That's the classic triptych triune pagan idea, like the three Norns, this kind of thing. The three aspects of you have Vishnu, Vishnu, Krishna, and see, I'm half awake today. I was up late editing that video, and it will come to me. Or one of you will come to me. Letter J. Anyway. So anyways, the threefold thing. So you have this idea in paganism that everything is animism, everything has a life. And naturally, that extends to the planet Earth. So you have the ancient Greek thing of Gaia, right? Now, astrotheologists and Abrahamics think that's symbolic. They don't understand that it is literal. It's not just we see the earth as a symbolic goddess, Gaia, or we see it as a literal living thing with a consciousness. And everything that takes place on this planet, including the growth of humans and possibly this collapse in birth rates happening globally, is controlled by it, right? Now, if you're going to apply this planetary animism towards the planet Earth, you have to apply this planetary animism towards the planets, the wandering stars in the sky, which they did. So not only was the Earth alive, but Saturn, L, was alive. Jupiter, Lucifer, Jove was alive. Venus, Lucifer, Phosphorus was alive. Mercury was alive, and Mars was alive. And in planetary animism, there is a psychic connection between human beings and the forces emanating from these planets. So generally, there was a belief that the god Mars, the planet Mars, would agitate human beings to go to war. Not like saying like it's an astrological alignment that's like creates his forces on Earth. That's a different thing, and that's another whole. No, literally, the planet Mars was actually inspiring individuals on this Earth to go to war, and then later on there may be an interesting reason for that. Likewise, so we had a situation where you have. We'll just stick with one planet for now. Well, we're going to do two, three really, Earth. So in that equation. So the first planet. So the ancient pagans, Jews of the Semitic regions, they worshipped the planet, the god El, Elohim, which is that's what their animistic religion, and Saturn is the furthest away of the main planets, the inner solar system planets. You can see with the naked eye. And so they began worshipping it. Now, you ask why they began worshipping it. What makes it different than anything else? Well, the Bible tells you. El demanded worship. So some kind of psychic link took place between the people of the Semitic regions and the planet El. Some dynamic planetary animism took place. Now, I know this sounds amazing, but it's not if you're pagan, that they were actually, it demanded worship. Now, why it's the furthest of the planets out from Earth, visible from the naked eye. Now, Tycho Brahe much later on suggested there was probably more planets beyond it due to irregularities in its orbit, which later on Herschel and the rest discovered. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. But before that, so there's something wrong with the structure of the actual structure. It's almost like a disabled planet. Saturn, as beautiful as it is and as striking as it is, it lacks a fundamental energy to hold it. The planet is barely keeping itself together. It lacks a huge amount of energy. Okay, and so you can look this up yourself. There's a massive energy deficient in Saturn that doesn't exist on any other planet. It's barely sustaining itself, which is kind of worrying in a way when you think about it. It could actually, if it could lose its orbital trajectory, which brings us to Venus. Now we jump into the world. Now, a book that was a huge influence on me growing up was Emanuel Velikovsky's Worlds in Motion, in which it was probably the book that really got me interested in comparative and ancient mythology that has led me where I am today. But in Worlds in Motion, Velikovsky theorized, using stories of the stars in the sky being in different places, that the deluge, the great flood, was actually caused by something that knocked Venus out of its previous orbit between the Earth and Mars. It flew by the Earth, caused catastrophic global changes and planetary tilting. The stars were in the wrong place in the sky, remember? And ended up in the orbit between Earth and Mercury. Now, Velikovsky suggested that when this happened, it would have pulled an enormous amount of energy away from the closest planets on the outer side, so Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And the proof of this would be that the planetary surface of Venus would be much, much hotter than what was expected. Now, when the Russians landed there in 72 and they tested them, they were shocked by how hot Venus was. It's hotter than Mercury, which is much closer to the sun. So that was like kind of like, well, that proved its theories. Now, when and humans were around when this happened, this may have been about 12,000 years ago, that classic time, because it's in so many folklores, this whole thing of a flood, of a deluge, and it's even in the Irish thing. People say it's not, but the two of the Dannon came to Ireland in a storm, and so it would have been a catastrophic event on the planet. Okay, so it would have caused a planetary tilting, and this would have caused sloshing of the ocean, so enormous tsunamis, right? This would have also created enormous volcanic activity. And the combination of the water and the volcano would have caused a greenhouse effect, where it rained forever, for an incredible period of time. So the ones who had survived the tsunamis and the volcanoes would have been subject to astonishing levels of rainfall until the climate started to settle down again. Now, a good, how to envision this would be the Turner painting, The Deluge. I think of all the paintings in history that kind of, for me, would show what the deluge was like, it would be the Turner painting, which you'll see on the screen now. See it? To me, that's a fantastic painting of what it would have been like. It wouldn't have been fun. Now, the worst place, and one of the worst places on Earth you could be to go through this planetary shock by Venus passing the Earth, would have been what we call the Holy Land. Why? Because it's way below sea level. So the Mediterranean Ocean would have just poured in, okay, until it ran out later on through the Gulf of Aqaba and out that direction and back into the Mediterranean. The only ones who would have survived in that part of the world would have been ones who would have been, Noah's people, whatever they were, those Semitic people, up on the high areas. So, up on the Golan Heights, up around Mount Sinai on that peninsula, and up around Turkey, okay? Up towards Turkey direction, the mountains up around there. So that would have been the ark. That's where the animal, you see this, Christians are so fucking stupid. They actually think all the animals of the earth got into a boat, and it's just when we were kids, we had toy arks. I had a toy ark when I was a little kid that had like all the animals in it, and there was a little hatch on the deck for the two giraffes to stick his head. Fucking adorable, actually. The fucking two giraffes sticking out of the top of the deck. But the Christians actually believed that ship was real, okay? And all the animals behaved themselves somehow, okay? And, and even the little plastic lions I had were two males with the males. So it was like, how did they make lion cubs? Where did Simba come from? But anyway, these high-level regions around the Holy Land was where the animals survived, the people survived, until the flood subsided and they could move back down and repopulate it. Okay, so the ark was a symbol of the high level regions of, and this story is told all over the world, by the way, of the Holy Land, Middle East, where the chosen people who lived up in the mountains survived. Now, maybe Noah was a smart guy, and maybe he said, "There's something coming," and he probably might have even been observing the sky and says, "Why is Venus suddenly moving across the sky? We better get to high ground," you know. So there could have been, or almost could be like, when I was in Sri Lanka, I went to the place where the tsunami like killed thousands of people. And what happened was, before the tsunami struck, the elephants that were carrying the tourists all ran up into the mountains because before the tsunami struck, and the tourists who were on the elephants all survived because they went up in the mountains with the elephants. And so something like that, people had much better sense back then of natural forces. There wasn't much electromagnetic pollution. So the ark was the mountains. The mountain was the mountains, okay? And when that was over, when the deluge ended, they all came back down and they repopulated and all that stuff, when they say Noah and his family, it could mean thousands and thousands of people, not a family with two of every animal on earth in a fucking a wooden boat. So so Venus moved across to cause this deluge down from the earth sloshing, right? So God, why have you forsaken us? Why has El allowed this to happen? Okay. Then the story develops as that Venus, Lucifer, Phosphor, was the brightest one in the sky when it was situated between Mars and, now this is my addition to the Velikovsky theory. When it was situated between Earth and Mars, it was the brightest body in the heavens. Okay. So it was cast out of heaven, away and through the earth, the brightest shining one, okay, went past Earth and landed between the orbital trajectory of Earth and Mercury, okay. So the brightest shining one was cast out of heaven. And there's, and then you can add all the stories to it, and you can change it around, and it suddenly becomes astrotheology. It suddenly becomes religion. Okay, so these people who say, "I'm so sure of the Bible," how can you be? It's all parables, metaphors, allegories. Now, and then does that affect your Christian beliefs or anything? No, it doesn't. You can still have all this, but if anything, I think it makes your religion more interesting. Now, so that's the Velikovsky and the planetary animism. Now, I want to talk about now Cosmism. Okay, this has really got to do your heads in, but you'll enjoy it. One of the most fascinating characters in history, and I'll put the link to the film I made about him, is Jack Parsons, who was basically the guy who created NASA and the JPL labs, Jet Propulsion Labs, who developed the rocket fuel mix needed to get to the moon. Okay, he was a Thelemite, and he was a member of the Thelema groups within Hollywood, Pasadena area, and very much what you would call an occultist. He was also a communist for a while, and then he gave up on that. But he was probably murdered by the FBI, because he was actually selling rocket fuel to the new state of Israel, and then he was blown up in his garage, and he died. And anyway, making rocket fuel, and it was probably almost certainly an FBI assassination. Now, Parsons was an occultist, a fascinating guy. He was I believe, the secretary of the Los Angeles Science Fiction Club. He understood a very kind of proto-chaos magic way of thinking that, and this is how he developed his friendship with Werner von Braun over the phone. Werner von Braun and Parsons were good friends on the phone, like talk about science, about both science fiction fans. Now, this is where all you flat earthers and people who don't believe in space, this is where you go down to the corner shop to get your roaches and your papers for your 15 joints today, because you won't be into this stuff. This won't. You think that space doesn't exist and no one can go to space. So, off you go. I think there's a 14-hour video on Satirist you can watch on Rumble. But everyone else, you'll find the rest of this very interesting. When the Russian space program started to take off, and even before that, the Soviet space program, they were very interested in this concept of there's something spiritual about space travel. And I'm into this too as well. As you know, I believe that the real story of the Apollo mission is that the astronauts who went in Apollo had remarkable experiences on the moon in those 3 days of sunlight, and they encountered things and saw things, and that's why they all came back loop the loop. And that famous press conference is the astronauts from Apollo 11 literally in shock, trying to explain to themselves what they even saw, and told to keep their mouth shut. This is why they won't be going back to the moon, I don't believe. The moon is a haunted realm. And it's probably alive in its own kind of way too as well. In fact, the Earth probably enticed the moon to come into its orbit in order to tidal lock it so the Earth could be stable for the development of life. Cover this in my book, Sorcery, the Invocation of Strangeness. Do I have anything to prove that? No. But I think it's a valid theory. Now, so these cosmists were like Parsons, and they believed that there was a supernatural spiritualism, a destiny of man, a kind of a rocket shamanism to leave this planet. And if you even look at, you have people saying, if you look at the old images on caves, they look like spacemen. Now, why would aliens who can travel across the galaxy show up on Earth wearing NASA spacesuits from the 1960s? They wouldn't even need that. But if you look, it's the other way around. If you look at astronauts, they look like shamans, because they are. And so the cosmists believed, mainly because of like the Soviet Union's prohibitions on theology and their belief in religion, that while spiritual experiences were not available to humans on this earth, they were available in outer space. And not only through space travel, but things like radio telescopes and observations. Very interesting when we tie this into quantum physics. And they really believed that the dead ancestors of people resided in outer space. Not as crazy as it seems. You leave an energetic footprint on this planet that actually projects it into beyond the quantum realm, and your essence may be in another part of the universe that the Earth left a long time ago. I'm just saying, but that was kind of like what they believed. I personally have a great interest in interplanetary travel, not particularly manned, but by using unmanned probe, because there is a shamanic element to this. Now, you think about how these probes go out. They are containing, like, what is shamanism? Shamanism is a human encroaching into the spirit world in order to bring back information from the spirit world that can be useful for people here on Earth. Traditionally, this was healing. How did they encroach into the spirit world? They crouched by wearing animal clothes, dressing often with elk horns and all kinds of animals, wolves, very common. And this was, they believed, with drumming, boom. And it wasn't like, it wasn't like bongo wanker at fucking Glastonbury. It was like boom, boom, boom. A hypnotic space travel. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. The rocket goes off into space. Okay. It is now transcended the mortal realm of Earth, of Gaia. It's gone into the domain of the gods. What does it do? It looks for information that we can use. Weather satellites can help with the weather, this kind of thing, right? But also when they become interplanetary probes, they take on a gravitas and a mystique that only adds to this concept of these kind of like rocket-fueled shamans, electro shamans. You take the Voyager things runs. I was a little kid when they were launched, and they're still sending back information from interplanetary space. After all the stuff they've done along the way, using I believe their computer hard drive is an 8-track recorder. And these people will say, oh, they didn't have the technology to land on the moon. There was just a little computer. People don't understand. These are high-end engineers. And they tell them, how did they land on the moon without like AI and machine? No. I want to blow your mind even more. They monitored the telemetry and sent back information using a slide rule and a sheet of paper, writing down cards. That's what engineers do. But of course, you don't understand that. You think you're smarter than everyone else because you saw, some Bart Seibel dumbass video. But anyway, the thing goes off into space, and it comes back with high-resolution images, increasingly high-resolution images of planets. So you look at the development, because of the different types of cameras and the different imaging software. You look at, I've seen Jupiter through a powerful telescope with the bands and the 4 moons. It is exactly what they say it is. As they, as they approach to it, there's 2 ways of looking at this. Are these higher resolution images? We're in the land of magic and quantum physics here. Capturing these images, or is the planet putting on a show? Have you noticed how ominous the images have become from Jupiter? How ominous they are. The better resolution pictures we've taken from them using probes. This is Jupiter is Jove, right? It's like the Hierophant of the solar system. It's like it is the one. It's the adjudicator of the planets. It stops asteroids from coming into the inner solar system by catching them and stopping them from hitting Earth and other things like that. It is like the Hierophant of the planets, right? And it looks more and more serious and more honest the more high resolution pictures come through of it. Now, Mars seems to be showing what incredibly looks like the ruins of old buildings. And was there a civilization living on Mars? Very possibly. How was it destroyed? When Lucifer, Phosphor, Venus fell from heaven, was cast out of heaven. Do you think the Earth got it bad? It probably pulled the atmosphere from Mars, which caused an inability for the atmosphere to hold in moisture, and it just became desiccated overnight. Well, not overnight, like a couple of hundred years. That's why I'm kind of like not adverse at all to the concept that people or some kind of people lived on Mars and built a civilization. There's a lot of evidence coming in now of hard angles, structures, and 90 degrees, which only appear in small crystals. They can never appear in anything major, and there's lots of other anomalies there too as well. So when God fell from heaven, Mars became angry. The planet became enraged. Not God, when Venus fell when it was cast out, Lucifer, Phosphor, Mars became enraged. The planet of war. Now, if you look at the early observations of Mars through telescopes, they all had drawings of canals. Lowell and all these top astronomers painted these things, and believed them, and believed there were civilizations on Mars. These canals that they believed that, like, when the rainy season came, these canals were used to bring water around the planet. We know those things don't exist now, or maybe they existed then, but they don't exist now. And Mars has become basically what looks like a war zone, the god of war. It looks like Hiroshima after and you have these people who want to go back and they want to go live on Mars. And I made a video years ago called Mars equals Mars One. Remember that stupid lunatic NPC thing to go live and die on Mars? Mars One equals space Israel. It was the new Holy Land. It was a desert in the space. And that would tie into this thing as well of the planetary catastrophism. So these spaceships, like, well, the New Horizon one went into Pluto, very close to Pluto, and took incredible photos of Pluto. And Pluto, rather than being a ball of ice, had a very complex geological surface, and it looked a lot like you got, and H.P. Lovecraft discovered Pluto. He discovered it. And the video at the time, I made a video called, if you look for Lovecraft's New Horizons. So there's an element of this whole thing of, like, Cosmism is true, that if you apply these scientific, they become shamanistic. And the spaceships are like kind of electro shamans who leave this planet. They bring back new information through radio signals back. And these radio signals sent back, they give us information from the spirit world, where the planets revolve as spirits, into this world. So shamanism never went away. Now, you can really go on incredible tangents of enjoyment and speculation regarding this stuff. But in order to say what I'm saying here, you have to have evidence, in terms of, like, what Velikovsky had the evidence with his using mythology, and also he was able to prove successfully that the surface Venus would be much harder than it should be. So he wasn't pulling it out of his arse, He wasn't just saying, oh, Venus sounds like penis, and so it was fucked out of heaven. Which is like that's the kind of shit that goes on in the old scene. No, he did the work, he did the research, he provided credible evidence, and there you go. Jack Parsons and the Cosmists were said that there would be a spiritual element to space travel. That's come true. It's tied in with science fiction. That's come true. Look how all the kind of speeches and things made of heaven. Now, and by the way, this whole thing of, like, these people all being fakes and stuff like. Oh, the Nazi scientists also believed it as well. The Nazi rocket scientists, and so there was a belief that, like, we're not just building machines to leave the atmosphere. We're building kind of like angels and this kind of thing, And it also ties in with ufology and, alien folklore, particularly from the Jacques Vallée kind of thing. And so, but the thing to remember is, yeah, okay, there's very good evidence of lots of things I've said here, but they may not necessarily not be the truth. But they're good enough to go with in terms of speculation and to run with that ball. Now, you would have a situation where new truths emerge. We know that happens all the time. But some truths only get strong. Well, some theories only get stronger. And one of them is Velikovsky's worlds in motion, catastrophism, because it ties in nicely with lots of things: astrotheology, cosmism, and planetary animism. So when you have something that can hit a touchstone of three things like that, which is why I brought them into this video, you're probably onto something that has a lot of veracity to it. It's not, is it the absolute truth? No, no one has the absolute truth about anything. But what we have are good evidence that we're moving in the right direction. So a lot of people in the truth scene, they watch a video and they go, "Oh, I know what it is now. This explains it all." You don't know dick. You just watched a video. And that's what they're like. And then they watch a video a week later that completely contradicts the one they just believed and say, "Oh, that was all wrong. It's now this." They don't understand. See, this is their Christian polluted minds again. They're looking for the word. How about just sitting back and letting these things flow through you and see what sticks and what doesn't, rather than becoming an evangelical Christian, a proto-crypto Christian, and saying this is now the word of God, this is now truth. This is why I don't like the term truth, or it's why I don't like the term truth movement, because it has that Christian connotation. This is why this scene is full of like retarded Christians for talking bollocks, and because they're applying their sort of like evangelical Christian bullshit to everything. No, you don't have to, proselytize or be evangelical about it. You can just let it flow through you. I find personally that all this stuff has validated my paganism. Someone who's a Christian might say, and a devout real Christian might say, this validates their Christianity. A Buddhist, and on and on and on. That it helps create something that is what's the word I could use instead of truth? A sort of a comparative living mythology that you can work with, that gives you just enough to make you have the kind of to keep you building neural pathways in your brain because you're not stuck in dogma, but also enough to say, this is making me feel more comfortable about my chosen spiritual path, in my case, paganism. So this is when I said to put up that on the video calling yesterday, when I put up that picture saying this is the God Tucker Carlson worships, I'm not making fun of Tucker Carlson's beliefs. I have a lot of respect for Tucker Carlson because he's changed his mind on things over the years, and anyone who can change their mind on things is a very noble person in my view. It's one of the reasons I don't like lefties. Lefties can't change their mind on anything. They're just stuck in they would destroy their own world in order to maintain that, this is what Woody Guthrie sang about. You see what's happening in cities like Portland and San Francisco. They're absolutely falling apart because late boomer hippies are singing Michael rowed a boat ashore, or This Land is Our Land with a bunch of ukuleles, thinking that they're still, it's still the 1960s where, people are dying on the streets. And it's horrible. But they're still convinced that this is the answer. It's not the answer. Things have changed and moved on. This is why I'm actually even got a lot of respect for left-wing people. When I say left, I mean real liberals. Socialists can't change. They just can't. But some, like the younger left-wing people, like the Young Turks, right? They're definitely you see how they changed. They're like, we've got to bring the left and right to actual common sense. And I think that's extremely healthy. And so, you've got to, this is a, I mean, it's just you've got to allow these stories to flow through you, ride with them, but not become caught in their current, because you'll find yourself drowned in the deluge. And I would encourage everyone to keep looking, keep searching. Don't take my word. Very important. Don't be listening to me and saying, that fucker has the answer. It's not like that at all. This is a philosophical exercise, and I think a noble and a worthy one. So there you go. Astrotheology, planetary animism, cosmism, and all of them have helped my, it may seem incredible to person. How can a spaceship help your paganism? Well, because it validated the belief that these planets are alive as the resolution of the photos come better from them. They're, Pluto should be a ball of ice, but it isn't. Why? Because Pluto has some level of consciousness that keeps it geologically active. Why? Because Lovecraft was right about Ugot, the lost world on the edge of the universe, and eventually we will, there's a quantum physics element. I'm not going to wrap this up now. No, I won't drive you mad anymore. But like, keep looking and keep searching. There's other videos to be made on this and so on. And again, I'm a tribe person. If you think I'm full of shit, or you have another view of it, the comments are open to you once you're nice and behave yourselves. Okay, take care.